Oh boy, here we go again.
Why is the shrinking markets concept that Hitler believed in, being one of the main reasons for the Second World War, not being taught in schools or mentioned in most of the books when discussing National Socialist Germany? Well, the truth is that Hitler didn't come up with the shrinking markets concept. He most likely got it from Werner Sombart, a radical Marxist socialist economist, later turned National Socialist. Bukharin also believed in the shrinking markets, as did Rosa Luxemburg. Even Keynes used this line of argument so fervently taken up. Marx himself talks about this in Das Kapital Volume 3 with the tendency of the rate of profit to fall fallacy.
Rate of profit to fall fallacy? Really? It's a fallacy?
In a nutshell, capitalist profits will fall at the same time that population sizes increase, leading to starving people and thus the revolution.
It would have been convenient if you could have quoted Marx and pointed out where exactly Marx says this, because that's not what the tendency of the rate of profit to fall is. The rate of profit doesn't fall because the population rises or something. That's not what it is about at all. It's about improvements in technology, improvements in productivity, not population size. I don't really want to go into a lot of detail about the theory of the falling rate of profit, but basically the idea is this. When you invent a new type of machine, it makes producing commodities faster and cheaper. It takes less work to produce a product. Imagine mining some coal with your bare hands versus mining coal with a pickaxe versus mining coal with some giant modern mining machine. Obviously, you're going to be able to mine much more coal with much less work, much less workers, using big machines versus using little pickaxes. Now, what does that do? When one capitalist invents a big machine, this makes that capitalist able to produce much cheaper, because they have this machine, they have a competitive advantage. Now, when everybody else catches up to this and they also start using those machines so that they can also be competitive, this causes the value of the product to plummet, because now making this product is much easier. Back in the day you had to use archaic methods, but now you have these brand new machines that make producing this commodity easier. So the value of the product goes down. Now at the same time as the value of the product goes down, investment costs go up. Because now, if you want to enter the market, or if you want to continue this line of production, you have to use this fancy machine. You can't just use the old pickaxes or old manual spinning wheel or something. You need to have some giant machine. That's what the falling rate of profit is about. As technology and productivity increases, there is a marked tendency for the rate of profit to fall. And this is not a fallacy. This is observable. What TIK is really saying is a fallacy. He's saying that because economists discovered a truth about the world, that is the falling rate of profit, or the shrinking market as he calls it, that because Hitler also believed it, therefore the economists, including Marx, are somehow the same as Hitler. That's the same as saying if Hitler believed in gravity, that makes Newton a Nazi. No, it doesn't work like that. The reason that even Nazis believe in gravity is because gravity is an observable fact, just like the falling rate of profit is an observable fact, especially to German capitalists who were saying, look, our profits are falling, something must be done. You need to crush the unions, you need to privatize things. Things that didn't used to be for profit now have to be opened up for profit making. You have to give us large government contracts, implement war economy, prepare for colonial conquest, take us out of the recession, and get our colonies back. And what do you know? Probably by sheer coincidence, Hitler does exactly that. It's almost as if he's doing what his wealthy capitalist buddies are telling him to do. One more thing about the population size. The falling rate of profit is not caused by the population increasing, but it's actually the entire opposite. If the population were to increase, then that would actually minimize the effects of the falling rate of profit. The cause is that there are more machines, more constant capital investment per worker. Now, if the population were to drastically increase, then that would actually make it a little bit better. So, TIK has it exactly backwards. At this point, let's take a little detour and look at his previous video, because that is where he talks about this shrinking markets thing. And initially, when I recorded, I just kind of took it at face value, but it's actually totally, absolutely wrong, everything he's saying about it. So let's take a moment to actually look at that.
When you stop and think about it, the traditional narrative as to why Hitler went to war makes no sense. Hitler, they say, was a madman who wanted to conquer the world.
When he's talking about the usual explanations for World War II, he's absolutely correct. All those usual explanations that Hitler was just crazy, or that he attacked the Soviet Union just because he hated communists, or because he thought that they were all Jews. Of course, those are childish explanations. That's not how history works. So he is right about that.
Well, it turns out that there is an actual reason as to why Hitler went to war in the Second World War.
Yeah, there is a reason, but you don't know what it is, unfortunately.
The industrialized West trades its industrial goods to the rest of the world in exchange for food. But wait a second. If we trade industrial goods to these non-industrial powers, they will become industrialized. They will make their own factories. They will make their own machine tools and grow their own cities. But if they grow their own cities and they make their own industrial goods, they won't need our industrial goods. And they won't want to give us their food because they'll need it for themselves. The poor people will go hungry. And if the poor people go hungry, that will lead to class warfare, which will, in Hitler's mind, be exploited by the Jews, who will usher in a Marxist revolution. This is the shrinking markets idea.
Now, the first problem with that is obviously that this shrinking markets theory has absolutely nothing to do with Marx, has absolutely nothing to do with Rosa Luxemburg, and although I'm not an expert on Keynes, I wouldn't be surprised if it didn't have anything to do with Keynes either. My guess is that TIK is simply absolutely ignorant about Marxism, doesn't know what Marx actually said, doesn't know what Rosa Luxemburg actually said. He probably just read some weird book where some guy claimed this was true and then he accepted it. But since I am a Marxist, I happen to know what Marx actually said, and I even went through Rosa Luxemburg's Accumulation of Capital to see where she talks about the shrinking market theory, because I've never heard this before. Like, yeah, my Rosa Luxemburg might be a little bit rusty, but how TIK characterizes Hitler's shrinking markets idea is that they see a shrinking foreign market. They think that the other countries don't want to buy their goods anymore. They see a shrinking foreign market. Now, like I already explained, this has absolutely nothing to do with Marx's idea of the tendency of the rate of profit to fall. And when Rosa Luxemburg mentions a shrinking market, this is what she says. Quote, "It is capitalism itself which brings about a shrinking home market since it impoverishes the masses." So she's talking about the home market, not the foreign market. So already this is just way, way off. What Rosa Luxemburg is actually talking about is what in Marxist economics is called a crisis of overproduction. It means that productivity goes up, but wages don't go up at the same rate. The capitalists have a necessity to exploit people harder, and by exploiting them harder, you don't necessarily need to lower wages, although you can do that. You don't necessarily need to work them harder, although you can. You don't necessarily need to work them longer, although you can. Even if you just keep the wages and the hours the same, but productivity increases, then you are exploiting them harder, in a sense. You're getting more out of your workers because productivity is higher. For example, because of better machines or better tools, better organizational methods or what have you. You're getting more out of your workers, but wages are lagging behind. That eventually leads to a crisis of overproduction, where you are producing all these products, but the consumers are not buying all of them, because the workers that you are exploiting are also the customers. You have to exploit them harder, you have to get more out of them, but the more you exploit them, the more profits you make, the worse the crisis of overproduction becomes. This happens very frequently in capitalism. It is a problem that cannot be solved. So Rosa Luxemburg explains that the home market is now full. The workers at home are too poor, they can't buy. You have to find other markets. And that's what imperialism is all about. You can conquer lands, you can steal resources, you can enslave populations and use them as cheap labor or slave labor. But it's also very important to capture markets. And that is actually the real reason behind World War II. Imperialism, just like World War I. All the various capitalists, French capital, British capital, American capital, Japanese capital, German capital, they're all growing too big for their home countries. They all want to expand abroad. Now the French and the British, they already had a bunch of colonies, but the thing with Germany is that Germany lost its colonies. So German capital really wants places to expand. They are just drooling over African colonies and all the resources they can get from Russia and all the cheap labor they can get. So the falling rate of profit and the crisis of overproduction are absolutely real. The fact that the capitalists can't get enough goods sold, the fact that their profits are stagnant, all these are absolutely real. And they understood it. They saw it. Of course the capitalists are going to see it. But that said, they're not Marxists, so they will try to come up with alternate explanations. And this theory that Hitler had is one of those alternate explanations. And it's a really bad explanation, it doesn't really work, but it's trying to make sense of these same facts.
What Hitler decides to do is stop this supposed Jewish conspiracy in its tracks. To do this, he must solve the class crisis by uniting the German workers and bourgeoisie under one nation.
They have all these ideological rationalizations why they must do what the imperialist capitalists want. They must crush Marxism, they must crush the workers' movement, they must try to implement class collaboration and get rid of class struggle, and they have to go out there and conquer foreign markets, foreign resources, and get access to cheap foreign labor. And they have all these conspiracy theories about Jews to rationalize it. How convenient. Maybe Hitler actually believed it, but the fact is, countries don't go to war, and World War II doesn't happen because some people have conspiracy theories. They could actually see a crisis of overproduction. They could see the symptoms of it. They attribute it to the Jews, or what have you, but that doesn't really matter. And even if it didn't really jive with their worldview, they still did it because of these real economic necessities and economic incentives. That capitalism must expand, must imperialize. And Germany had no colonies. They had a military-industrial complex and a bunch of imperialists running the country. Of course they're gonna invade.
Now, I can talk about why this concept of the shrinking markets isn't discussed more in the books, or why it isn't taught in schools in the future.
Unfortunately, now this just goes way off the rails. He thinks that this theory is not discussed because all the teachers and all the university professors and all the historians and everybody in the media are all Jews. I mean, Stalinists, Marxists. That's literally what he thinks. I wish that were a joke, but it's not. The real reason why this is so rarely talked about is because capitalist ideologues don't like to talk about economics. They want to say that Hitler was a madman because they don't want to admit that the reason World War II happened, and the reason World War I happened, and the reason all imperialist wars happen, is because capitalism must expand. It must seek out new opportunities, cheaper resources, cheaper labor, new markets. They don't want to talk about that. And this topic is coming dangerously close to that. And I feel like even TIK is coming very close to understanding it, but he's not quite there. And really the tragedy of this video is that even though he talks about economics, he still ends up thinking that Hitler was just a guy with a bad theory, and that's why the war happened. But that's not the case. It wasn't just because he had a theory. He saw the symptoms of absolutely real economics. although he had a conspiratorial way of trying to interpret those facts. Now, ironically, TIK himself does the same exact thing. He doesn't want to admit that World War II happened because of imperialism, because of capitalism, because, that would make him a Marxist. So instead he turns to conspiracy and just says, oh, it's because all the university professors and whatnot are all secret Stalinists. Some book probably said it, so he believes it.
In fact, the shrinking markets, I am told by several commenters, is still being taught today in universities by Keynesian economists and Marxist socialists because they're looking forward to that juicy revolution, which will never come because the shrinking markets problem only affects socialist economies, not capitalist ones.
Excuse me, what? You have so many sources, but why don't you have any sources about this? This is fucking wild. I've never heard this before. So, according to TIK, the falling rate of profit, something which, as far as I know, exclusively impacts capitalism. According to TIK, it only impacts socialism, not capitalism at all. Huh. Furthermore, obviously revolutions can happen for a number of different reasons, but if you look at, for example, the Russian October Revolution, it is a pretty classic example of profits falling, all the capitalists feeling that they need to start expanding to other countries, colonizing other countries, stealing from other countries, taking over markets of other countries in order to sustain their high profits. You get World War I, which leads to a massive collapse in living standards and massive crises in many, many countries and sparks revolutions in all those countries, including Russia, Germany, Hungary, Slovakia, Finland, Estonia, blah 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 blah. So there you have the falling rate of profit. Now in the 30s, the crisis didn't manifest in the same way. It didn't manifest as communist revolutions. Maybe there would have been an attempt in Germany, but the capitalists began supporting Hitler because Hitler was crushing all the communists and protecting capitalism. This is why we call fascism capitalism in decay or capitalism in crises. Because fascism is a strategy that the capitalists turn to when they are in crises and when they are in danger and they need to protect their precious capitalist system.
If you understand basic economics, you would know this. Link in the description to Economics in One Lesson and Thomas Sowell's Basic Economics.
And I also like the basic economics meme, but the thing is, this is not basic economics. This is Marxism. It's a little bit more advanced. I mean, it's not rocket science really, but obviously TIK has not understood it.
Rosa, Luxemburg, Bukharin, Sombart, Keynes, and Marx? But these are all Marxist socialists.
Are you actually saying Keynes was a Marxist, or is this just a slip of the tongue?
Oh, that's why they don't teach you about this. Because they don't want you to know that Hitler was a socialist.
What? Who's they? Who the hell is they?
Socialism. You get money for free when you murder and steal from the bourgeoisie.
Oh my god, please don't do this. Why have you now... Why... We all used to like those World War II videos where you were debunking myths. But now? What have you become, my sweetest friend? Look at this picture. Look at this image. I truly did not expect this to be as bad as this. So let me get this straight. You think that the capitalists who rule the Western world and, all the capitalist countries, they want to protect the reputation of Marxism, and for that reason they try to hide the fact that Hitler was a secret Marxist? In what reality does that make sense? I don't know if it's possible that TIK actually, could he be doing this disingenuously? Because it seems to me hard to believe that he would believe something as stupid as this. I even said this in my first response to TIK. Usually the only people who push that sort of idea are right-wing libertarians and free market fundamentalists. Not even mainstream right-wing, but a little bit more to the right from that. Because I knew that from personal experience. Because I've already made 2 responses to right-wing libertarians who have made this argument. I have never seen anyone else make this argument, besides right-wing libertarians. So I am a bit surprised that TIK believes something like this.
Socialism. You get money for free when you murder and steal from the bourgeoisie. Or the Jews.
What about when you invade other countries and colonize them, like the capitalist imperialists do? Is that socialism too? If you look at, like, the Soviet Union in, like, 1951 or something, the capitalists were long gone. Whose money were they stealing then? Why do I even have to explain this? Socialist countries, they have societally owned, public sector enterprises, and then those enterprises make products. They make goods and services, and that's where their societal wealth comes from. They make it themselves. The workers produce it, and then it gets used by society. There is no theft involved. And to be honest, even stealing from a capitalist, that's basically taking back what the capitalist stole from you. It's the workers who make everything. In capitalism, the capitalist appropriates what the workers make. So if anything, socialism is just cutting out the middleman. The workers make stuff and then they use it.
I am a socialist. I see no class and no socialist state before me, but that community of the Volk.
Why do you even bother with this? Just because Hitler claims to be a socialist, that is not in and of itself evidence of anything. Hitler obviously had a very different definition of what socialism means. Take Hitler, Bernie Sanders, Karl Marx. Are they the same kind of socialist? Clearly not. It's just dishonest to say, oh, he used the word socialist, therefore he must be the same. Even among Marxists, there's plenty of people who claim to be Marxist, but then their actual policies don't reflect Marxism. You can't just take Hitler's word for it, you have to actually look at the kind of economy that he built. Did Hitler collectivize all the farms and drive out the capitalist landowners? No. Did Hitler nationalize all the industries and get rid of the capitalists and bankers and whatnot? No. In fact, he privatized all the industries. His best friends were capitalists. I mean, Hitler was good friends with Henry Ford. Was Henry Ford also a Marxist?
But the Marxists, the international socialists, the inter-Nazis, will deny this. They will say National Socialism wasn't real murder and theft. It's not real socialism.
Please don't do this. Come on. What? This is embarrassing. I don't understand. How have you devolved so far? My brain gets smaller just watching this. Usually the people who say it wasn't real socialism are people who say that Marxism wasn't real Marxism. They look at the Soviet Union and they say that wasn't real Marxism. Those people, left comms, or in some cases democratic socialists or whatnot, they are a topic for another day. But so far in this video, you haven't addressed any arguments. You have just said they are going to disagree, and somehow that proves they're wrong. Just because you know we're gonna disagree doesn't mean we're wrong. In fact, it would be much more valid for me to make this argument about you. You say Nazism wasn't real capitalism. It's very easy to point out that Nazism was capitalism. They had private capitalists owning everything, making all the money, privatizing industries and all that. But you're gonna say, no, that wasn't real capitalism because Hitler claimed that he supports the working man. Oh, I'm a socialist. I'm best friends with banker millionaires, but oh, I'm a socialist. I really care about the working German. Meet my millionaire banker friendos, who now own all the industries that I privatized. But I'm a socialist. I care about the poor. And you believe him why? Because it's convenient for your weird ideology?
Our adopted term socialist has nothing to do with Marxist socialism. Marxism is anti-property. True socialism is not.
So isn't it obvious that Hitler has a very strange definition of socialism? Every other socialist until that point had said that socialism means collective ownership of the means of production, abolition of private property. But Hitler comes along and says, no, I am a socialist, but I don't believe in any of that. So he's not a socialist. That's like if I said, well, I'm a Newtonian, but I don't actually believe in any of Newton's physics.
So what actually is socialism?
I'm all ears, buddy. I'm all ears.
The technical definition is the socialization of the means of production. Another way to put it would be the nationalization of the means of production.
First of all, those two things are not synonymous. Socialization is something owned by a socialist society. Nationalization is something that is just owned by any type of state. It can be a capitalist state, it can be for profit, it can even be only partially nationalized and partially belong to private capitalists, etc. They're clearly not synonymous. And once again, even under this definition, Hitler is not a socialist. He privatized industries.
Otherwise called the state control of the economy.
Please don't try to pull this. This is so dishonest. State control of the economy. What does that even mean? That's so vague. It means nothing. State control. Well, the state always controls what happens in its own borders. Why don't you use a term like freedom or something? It's even more abstract and vague.
I find it interesting how these revolutionaries are so quick to defend taxation, regulation, state healthcare, state wage fixes, state price fixes, bureaucracy, social workers, state unemployment payments, state police forces?
Why? Why? So far, this entire video has just been like this weird shit-talking and just strange edginess. You're not a real revolutionary since you want to build a better society? Huh? Yeah, maybe this is gonna work on like some guy who thinks he's an anarchist because he likes punk. But it's not gonna work on somebody who actually knows what they're talking about.
State road building projects, high state tariffs, state house building, theft, also known as the redistribution of wealth.
You should just stick to entirely different topics, okay? So any redistribution of wealth is theft. Well, TIK, do you support theft then? I mean, unless you're gonna say you definitely disagree with any type of redistribution of wealth, then that must mean you support theft. I think in a socialist society, taxes are fine. In a capitalist society, they are taking money from the working class to uphold an oppressive capitalist state machine. They're used to give subsidies to the rich and all that, so I don't support them. But I think in a socialist society, having some kind of taxes is fine. Some kind of pension fund, having a fund for taking care of the sick is fine. I don't consider that to be theft, since we live in a society. People are entitled to certain basic human requirements, and we all work collectively, cooperatively, and we share in the common fruits of our common labor. Really, this whole idea of redistribution of wealth and theft and all that, it's a strange idea because nobody is really an island all alone in our modern society. We all work collectively, we live collectively. It's pretty hard to separate where exactly the work you do and the wealth you earn splits off, you know. We use public roads, public schools, public electricity. We are fundamentally a social cooperative species with a culture and a common language and all that stuff. We simply couldn't function on our own. Private property in that sense is entirely erroneous. Nobody can be truly self-made where, oh, I just came up with all these ideas myself. I invented my own language, my own tools. Nobody else taught me shit. I built everything from raw materials I myself mined from the ground. No, it doesn't work like that. We work together collectively.
State education, public state transport, the state central planning of the economy, and the nationalisation and socialisation of businesses.
Yeah, those are very anti-revolutionary things. Or something. Why can't we support those things?
Sounds really revolutionary, doesn't it?
Maybe in your mind this argument you're making makes sense, but it doesn't make any sense to me.
But the state's not socialism or anything.
Huh? What? You just said state central planning of the economy and nationalization and socialization of business?
Nationalisation and socialisation of businesses.
That is socialism! That is what socialism is. That's not just any state, that's socialism! There are two types of states. Even in my previous argument, I didn't even know what you were gonna say. And I still made the caveat that I don't support taxes in capitalism, but I think in socialism they would be fine. There are two types of states. There are capitalist states and socialist states. Capitalist states don't have centrally planned economies where there is no private property and everything is only socialized and collectivized. That doesn't happen in capitalism. Is your brain backwards or something? Like, I didn't want to make this into some kind of snarky 2008 like ponage video or something, but it's turning into that because
here's a factory with a bunch of workers and the governor of the factory. Alright, governor. Then the workers decide that instead of working hard, creating their own factories and amassing wealth by exchanging products with the community for money, it's better to rise up, murder the governor and his wife and kids, and steal the factory.
Let me ask you something, TIK. Who the fuck built the factory? Did this sweet old governor, did he build the factory with his own hands? I think not. He probably paid a bunch of money for a bunch of workers to build the factory, and then to work in the factory as he just sat there, collecting the revenue. Do you know what a worker is? Do you know why they call them workers? Because they do the work. Yeah, this poor guy, he just inherited a bunch of money and then he bought a factory, and then he exploited his workers and they didn't like it. The workers are thieves. They're stealing the value that they themselves created.
The workers thus become the government, plural, of the factory. A state, according to the Oxford English Dictionary, is a piece of territory with a politically organised community in charge of it.
When you say any territory that has a political organization that's a state, I don't like that definition because it ignores the role of the state as the thing that has the monopoly on force. I take that to be the key characteristic of a state, is the monopoly on force.
By rising up in the revolution, the workers have become the state.
So, if all it takes is to have a territory, however small that may be, and some kind of organization that's a state, well, how wasn't it a state before? Like, clearly it was just a dictatorship when the capitalists owned it. It was one guy who was at the top controlling everything. It was a dictatorship, and now that the workers have taken over, it is a democracy.
Now, what happens instead of the workers rising up and stealing the factory off the bourgeois governor? Instead, the German people rise up and steal the factory off the Jews.
Oh my god, he went there. Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ, man.
What's the difference?
I'm having an aneurysm. What is the difference indeed?